The story introduces some of the greatest magicians who made a significant mark in the history of magic. They are namely Ian Shiskin, Cherdian Sokolov, Cromwell Stingwood, Dmitri Kashin, and Marta Farharik. The apprentices of the magic of the later generations studied their theories. Even those who did not have an idea of magic studied their history and achievements. The status of the Empire of Magic has been elevated for centuries by the mere presence of these heroes. Now let's have a look at the Imperial Family Library at the Renelmus Academy. A single book on a lone shelf has consciousness and is surprisingly able to speak, but is arrogant while speaking about those heroes. It calls them talentless fools as they were worthless existences in its eyes. The book is actually a person from another world who has been reincarnated as a grimoire of immense knowledge in this world. When it first opened its eyes, it was extremely confused as it had been transformed from a human into a book. However, as time passed by, it found something fun to do, and that was raising magicians. The book says that raising an outstanding magician was not difficult since all they had to do was to open it and read it, and they could gain immense magical knowledge. With the theories and knowledge the book had instinctively understood, it had trained countless disciples for thousands of years. But now, it feels like it is rotting away in the library. This happens every time the previous owner dies. It agitates the book that it is back to that situation in this cycle. It has been 300 years since the book has trained, disciplined, and raised a magician. At present, the book has an urge to train a magician again and desperately wants someone to read it. Suddenly, out of frustration, it starts shouting at random readers in the library. One of the readers is a young boy wearing glasses. He is piling up the books of his interest while looking for a certain book. Moving by the corner where the book was placed, he hears the book's voice, but mistakes it for some human. The book doesn't expect the boy to have heard him because its voice could only be heard by those who have fulfilled the contract or have come in contact with it. Let's see what actually happens now. The boy steps back a bit to where he hears the voice and picks up the book from the rack. He believes the sound that he had just heard was from this book. To the book's astonishment, someone is able to hear it after so long. Without any further delay, the book introduces itself as Grimoire, the legendary Grimoire. The boy is astonished to see a book talking. Grimoire asks the boy to quickly turn its cover and go through its pages. It tries to lure him to read by telling him that if he reads this book, he will soon surpass the levels of apprentice, the low level, the mid-level, and also the high-level magicians, and that then he will become a great magician. The boy is still in a confusion as to what he is witnessing. The book tries calming him down, telling him that he could attain all of that if he joins the book on this journey of magic. If the boy reads the book, his astronomical magical talent will bloom through the book, and he will become one of the greatest magicians to be remembered throughout history. Despite behaving so politely with the boy, the book actually feels that it is completely useless to speak to make a contract with him, because the boy does not seem to have a lot of potential in magic. It is just sweet talk by the book to attract the boy and fascinate him into reading it. While it is true that the book wanted to make the boy a great magician, it primarily just wanted the boy to read it. But the boy doesn't want to become a magician. The book is shocked and asks him to rethink his decisions. The boy still replies with a no to the offer by the book because he wants to become a knight. On being asked, the boy introduces himself as China Yun's Belia. The book tries to bluff and tells him that he is better suited for magic than for a sword. The boy is confused after hearing that, so the book explains that it has been observing him for a long time, even though they just met now. To tempt the boy, Grimoire tries to say that the boy can become a magic swordsman who wields a sword in one hand and magic in the other. That now sounds really fascinating and cool to the young boy, so he agrees. When the boy opens the book, it starts floating and its pages rustle and fold. Golden magical runes appear, forming a brand on the back of the boy's hand. A strange magical voice notifies Grimoire that he has received the authority skill to teach the owner, and a lifelong binding contract has been established. Finally, the long and boring wait of 300 years is over, and Grimoire has now found its new owner and disciple. Its magician-raising activity starts again. The constantly pleading tone has now changed to a triumphant tone. The book is now enjoying its freedom from the darned bookshelf. Suddenly the boy reconsiders and tells Grimoire that he really should not study magic. He belongs to a knight family and does not want to be kicked out of his family for learning magic. The book, which was utterly excited a few moments ago, now seethes in rage at how the youngster could say this after the contract. It tells the boy that he can become 10 times stronger than his father with Grimoire's help, and that he would no longer have to listen to his father. The youngster is not happy with the suggestions and is bewildered by the violent way of thinking. The book thinks about how it has been 300 long years, and it is all going to go in vain if the boy now refuses. The knight boy asks the book if it can introduce another boy from the academy with whom the book can form a new contract. The book immediately refuses, saying that he cannot form another contract with anyone until the current contractor dies. The book fumes with rage at the boy for not having considered carefully before making the contract. It criticizes the coward for being unworthy of becoming a knight. The glass boy who had forcefully agreed to the contract is now furious at the book for its abusive behavior. He puts the book back on the rack and asks it to wait there until he dies. Although the book tries to say something to the boy, he ignores it, bids it goodbye, and starts leaving. The grimoire calms itself down and thinks of using its powers of authority to forcefully bring the boy back. However, it surprisingly realizes that it cannot use its power of authority for some reason. Frustrated, the book curses the boy to die. It curses him to smash his head into the ground and die right away. And the curse actually works. Right in view of the book, the young one's foot slips on a piece of paper and he falls down headfirst on the floor. His head gets smashed to a horrible extent, and half a day passes before his dead body is found. The body is quickly taken care of by the library staff, and the place goes quiet in the late evening. Realizing that the boy died at such a young age, the book feels sorry for him, but it takes a sigh of relief that the wait of 300 years is now over. The contractor is now dead, and a new phase will soon start in the book's life. Excited to start a new life, the book wonders where it will be teleported this time. What if it gets placed in the Grand Palace Library? Or what if the new location is a smelly underground slum or a shabby bookshelf on a market street? After all, it wishes for a place better than the Renelmus Academy Library. It is now late at night and Grimoire is alone in the library. Suddenly he hears someone trying to forcibly pick the lock outside the library door. The book thinks it might be a thief, but is surprised to see an academy student opening the doors. It is a girl wearing a hooded coat, and Grimoire is skeptical of the academy's standards after having met two odd people in a single day. Suddenly it hears the hoodie girl whisper Grimoire's name. The book realizes that she is searching for it and gets excited. However, it is midnight, and almost time for the book to be teleported to a new location since its owner had died that day. It shouts out in agitation to call for the hoodie girl. By a stroke of luck at the last moment, she turns around, spots the book behind her, and rushes to grab it. Grimoire is elated as the contract forms. It was the first time in 300 years that he had received a second contractor in the same cycle. After the stressful search, the girl is relieved that she found the book and slumps to the floor. Grimoire is intrigued by her ability to get in without being detected by the guards and surveillance outside the library. Grimoire suddenly takes on the form of a boy and stands in front of her. He asks her for her own name and her family name. The girl is named Riley and says she does not have a family name. He decides not to pry more, and instead asks her how she knew that he was in the library and just how she had been able to hear him. She tells the book that she had heard rumors about some accident in the library and decided to check herself. As to how she had been able to hear the book, she did not know. Grimoire is now interested in this absurd turn of events. He thinks that the child might have been born with a mana affinity comparable to a dragon or a spirit. If that is true, then she has an extreme amount of talent and potential. Grimoire feels that out of all his disciples, this girl might become the greatest archmage. He excitedly gives her a bop on the nose and introduces himself as the great mage Grimoire, who will make her an archmage. Riley brings the book back to her room and he sees that there are 5 beds which are all empty. Riley explains that all her friends have gone home for vacation, so she lives alone. Grimoire looks at her and thinks back to how even commoners had family names. Not having a family name could only mean that she did not have a family to begin with. He asks her to explain her circumstances to him. Since he would be guiding her, he needs to know more about her past first. And so she tells him her story. At the age of being able to differentiate between right and wrong, Riley had already become a member of a thieves' guild, where she did not have any name and was only called Tool Number 2. There was a boy, the Tool No. 1, who had joined before her, and they both shared a similar situation. They were mere tools for the thieves and spent every day following orders. However, at some point, other members of the Thieves Guild started to look at her with lecherous eyes. To keep such people away, she killed them so others would never dare to approach her. But no matter how many she killed, more fools always showed up, and she had to escape the guild in the end. After Riley has said this much, Grimoire can guess the rest. She was found by a high-ranking mage who recognized her talent and enrolled her in the Mage Academy. He asks her if she has faced bullying due to being enrolled as a special student at the academy. She tells him that there was a bit of it at first, but her friend Michiel from the Bailaric family helped her out of it. Grimoire nods his head and smiles. He decides that he will make sure to train her into a legendary archmage and reaches out his hand for a handshake. Just when she is about to return the gesture, there are loud knocks on the door and some girls can be heard shouting outside. They are cursing Riley and asking her to open the door. Grimoire is surprised and asks her to tell the truth if she is really being bullied. She affirms the fact with a straight face and unlocks the door. 4 girls enter the room and leave after cursing and beating her for a few minutes. She is left on the floor after a beating, and Grimoire is concerned if she is all right. She says she is fine and that hits from delicately raised rich nobility could not hurt her. Despite having a rough past, she cannot cause trouble with the nobility, or she would be expelled. Grimoire does not care much, but he is concerned that she already has little time to learn from him at the academy, so if she gets bullied on top of that, she will not be able to find time to learn magic. She is confused, so he gives her two options. Firstly, she can learn magic from him while enduring inside the academy. This would give her a guaranteed future. Or she can drop out of the academy to dedicatedly learn from him. This would make her future uncertain. In the end, she decides to leave the academy, and the dropout process takes less than 3 minutes. During the process, she has also learnt that no one else but her can see Grimoire's appearance as a boy. This is because it is only a form of his for communicating. But the book is his only true form. However, he is still disappointed that she decides to drop out of the academy as the students could get special potions and artifacts. She scrunches her face and says that he should have told her that sooner. Turning back, she starts walking in the direction of the academy building again. Grimoire teasingly asks if she regrets her decision. She tells him with a straight face that she is not going back to re-enroll, but to steal the artifacts. Her reasoning is that she would have achieved tremendous growth if he had taught her, and if she had stayed at Renelmus, she would have earned those items anyway. So this could not be considered stealing from the academy at all. Grimoire sighs as she walks through hidden paths in order to reach the vault and arrives at a fork in the road. She wonders which way to take. Grimoire takes this chance and tries to teach her pathfinding magic. She tells him that she already learned this at the academy and uses it with outstretched hands. Mana flows out of her hands and travels through both paths, discovering traps along the way. Grimoire tells her that she should not confine herself to the mediocre methods of common mages, which are ordinary and inefficient. He guides her to send her mana in all directions and feels the position and behavior of each mana particle she sends out. She focuses intensely on it and is astonished that she is able to see her entire surroundings and also see ahead of the form roads. After a bit more effort, she finally makes it to the vault and steals all the potions and artifacts that she can. By evening, they are done and are already on a ship away from the academy, headed towards the imperial capital. Grimoire feels a sense of freedom as he takes the scenery of the beautiful sunset. He then recollects everything that had happened and comes to a realization. He assumes a serious expression and asks Riley what her real reason for attending the academy is. Why did she want to learn magic from him? An old memory flashes before her eyes. She is reminded of the night when everything was in flames. She shudders at the recollection and decides not to think about it. She has a goal to achieve by becoming stronger, and she needs magic for that. Grimoire has had a lot of experiences in his 300 years of teaching, and concludes that it must be for revenge. She does not deny it, and asks him why he used to raise magicians. He avoids answering truthfully, and tells her that he is raising magicians just for fun because living as a magic book and doing nothing is boring. Once they are back in their cabins on the ship, she asks him what he plans to do. He tells her to read him the recommendation letter she had received from the mage who enrolled her in the academy. The enrollment letter is from the Irante's magic tower, which surprises Grimoire as he had never heard of it before. He had been hoping it would be a recommendation from a well-established tower, because magic towers were places to build connections and political backgrounds. Becoming a grand magician was not something dependent entirely on skill and needed political power too. Riley explains that the Irante's magic tower is actually one of the Empire's 5 great magic towers. It had been founded by Ian Irantes nearly 300 years ago. Seeing a picture of Ian Irantes, Grimoire wonders why they did not paint him when younger. She reveals that this tower master is still alive to this day, which shocks Grimoire. Although Ian Irantes has only reached the rank of High Mage, he is considered to have achieved feats beyond that of an arch-mage. He was a hot topic of discussion who had single-handedly elevated the status of the Irante's magic tower. Grimoire still cannot believe it. While 300 years can be considered a long time, it is not enough to change the landscape of the Imperial magic towers. However, in the book that Riley was showing him, one striking detail catches his eye. Ian Irantes was a student of one of the 5 great mages, Marta Farharich. The name strikes a chord in him because Marta was actually one of his own disciples whom he had trained to be an archmage. However, he keeps quiet and decides not to think about it. Soon they have reached the Imperial capital, and Riley is absolutely captivated by its beauty and splendor. Although she had come here before, it was only at night when she was doing dirty work from behind the shadows. Grimoire senses her excitement and tells her that they should have a look around first. She buys a delicacy called unicorn skewers and stupidly thinks it is actually unicorn meat. When Grimoire tells her it is probably just lamb meat, she feels cheated and pouts. While they are walking along, they come across a huge statue of the 5 great mages. Riley looks up to them in admiration, as geniuses with a passion for magic. However, Grimoire scoffs and says that they were all just a bunch of idiots. But they were hardworking and dedicated. Becoming sentimental, he decides to tell her the real reason why he used to train mages. He wanted to raise his contractors to become great magicians, but he also wanted their help in getting revenge. Revenge on those who had turned him into a scrap of paper. His disciples had gone through a lot of hardships for him, and Marta had even tried to create a resurrection ritual for him, which she sadly failed at. But as far as he remembered, Marta never had any disciples. He calls Ian Irantes a liar, and declares that he will never forgive a person who was impersonating his disciple's disciple. Riley smiles at seeing this side of Grimoire. She promises him that she will take revenge on the Irantes Tower Master for him, and he promises to help her with her revenge. Thus begins their story. Grimoire is reminded of his past. About 5 years after he had reincarnated as a grimoire, he was stolen from a shabby shop by a boy named Findal. Findal was a poor homeless boy who used to survive day by day while wandering the slums. He was his first contractor and the one who had named Grimoire. One day, Grimoire started teaching him magic and taught him how to gather and circulate mana. However, despite Findal's repeated complaints about the mana being too hot for him to handle, Grimoire had brushed it off and told him to stop whining. That was when he accidentally rushed in to gather mana and suffered mana overload. Findal ended up dying while his face burst out in blood due to the intense heat and energy in his palms that he could not control. Just then, Riley calls out to him, bringing him out of his thoughts. They are in a carriage right now, headed to a place Grimoire had specified to her earlier. Grimoire signals her to vocalize through mana instead of speaking directly. Due to the nature of their contract, they had a certain level of mutual understanding which allowed them to use mana to communicate with each other as if it were telepathy. It is a convenient technique in many situations. Riley asks why he had not taught her about such a simple technique earlier. The truth is that Grimoire found it cute when Riley whispered in front of others, so he had held back on teaching her the technique for a while. He cannot say that to Riley right now as she would get mad, so he decides to stay silent. However, as a contractor, Riley can know all of his true feelings that pass through his head. She glares at him for having done what he has done but does not do anything more. Grimoire then explains the selection test to Riley to get into the magic tower. As Irantes is one of the 5 great magic towers, it would have a tough selection test. They would not pick merely promising candidates. The towers would pick candidates with merit who can stand out from the rest of the crowd. The selection tests of the 5 great magic towers used to be called the Graveyard of Prodigies. This is because many promising candidates used to prepare for it their entire lives, while only a select few would clear it each year. However, Grimoire promises that he will help her clear the test in a mere matter of 6 months. She is surprised and asks if she can really reach the standards of a mid-level mage or higher in just 6 months. Grimoire smiles and says that it is entirely possible with his help, and to rest assured. The sun has set and the carriage arrives in a forest. The carriage driver is doubtful as to whether he is really in the right place. However, on confirming it, he drops them and leaves. This is the place where Riley will be training for the next 6 months. It is also the place where one of Grimoire's former disciples lives. Riley is amazed and thinks that he must be over 300 years old by now. He explains that his disciple is not alive and not exactly dead either. In fact, his disciple had become a lich. Riley cannot see anything but trees and asks where the lich is. Grimoire tells her it is a test for her, and she has to find the lich within the forest herself. This would also be the first stage of training for her. She immediately tries the pathfinding spell she had learned and spreads her mana out in all directions. However, the lich has set up a lot of disruptive spells that block her pathfinding. There are tons of complex magic formulas like barrier spells, illusions, magic distortions, and more that interfere with one's senses. The lich is watching Riley at the moment, just a few feet away from her. Even an advanced mage had taken half a year to find him, so he believed this mere apprentice mage would take much longer to be able to find him. However, Riley is at the level of a prodigy with her insanely high affinity with mana. Thus, despite all the interruptions and complex magic formulas in the area, Riley is able to easily find the lich. When the lich gets found out, he is surprised beyond measure. The lich is just a skeleton from head to toe with a purple robe draped on. He fumbles to find words to explain the situation. He had tried to sound cool but ended up looking like an idiot. Skelly whispers to Grimoire asking him how the golden-eyed girl had found him so fast when it usually takes 2 years. Grimoire looks smug and boasts that she has broken the fastest record of 4 months by breaking through the lich's barrier in less than 10 minutes. She had apparently reverse-tracked the very magic that was interfering with her pathfinding, making it a piece of cake to find the lich. Of course, this was something only she with her insanely high affinity for mana could do. As Grimoire and Riley are led through his hideout, Grimoire observes that the lich has not given up his bizarre hobby of collecting dangerous monsters as pets. The lich ignores the odd looks and smilingly invites them to tea. Without realizing it, He has been releasing his aura of death and dark magic all along, thus making Riley uncomfortable. Grimoire notices this and tells him to hide his aura. The Lich apologizes and says that he simply has not met anyone in a long time, so he has lost the habit. Having betrayed the laws of the celestial realm, he is a being of necromancy who defies death itself. His dark and deathly aura could affect any normal person enough to suffocate them. After he hides his aura, Riley feels much better. Grimoire sighs and tells her that this was the reason he raised a new disciple instead of keeping a lich around. Black magic, which was the foundation of a lich, was strictly prohibited in the Empire. To punish people like necromancers, devotees of evil gods and black magicians, an entire organization had been established called the Inquisition. Riley asks the Lich if anything eventful has happened since his last visit, which the Lich denies. Since he became a Lich 2,000 years ago, he has simply stayed at his hideout with occasional visits from Grimoire. He spends the rest of his time studying necromancy, black magic, and curses. Suddenly, he remembers an incident from 5 years back when he had to deal with adventurers who had found their way to his hideout. He says they might have got lucky and entered after mistaking his hideout for a dungeon. Since he was short-handed at that time, he had decided to make them slaves. He calls over one of them named Jeremy, who refills his teacup. Grimoire and Riley are simply speechless. Jeremy was no ordinary undead but a Death Knight. The crazy old Lich had made someone a Death Knight and still treated them as an ordinary adventurer. This was absurd because only extremely strong humans could become Death Knights after dying. Riley seems to recognize the sword at Jeremy's waist and says that he might be the leader of the Inquisition, who was said to have gone missing on a mission 5 years ago. Riley pops veins on his forehead as he curses at the Lich for being so carefree. Usually dark magic has a negative effect on the mind of Liches, so Grimoire used to visit frequently to make adjustments to his mental state. However, in the 300 he had gone off. The Lich had gone senile. The Lich clears his throat and asks why a disciple who was still an apprentice was already here. Grimoire tells him that if it is this girl, then she can handle training with him despite being at the level of a mere apprentice. He then proceeds to tell him about the situation regarding Marta and her disciple impersonator. The Lich hears his plan of infiltrating the magic tower and asks why he intends to take the trouble of entering it when he can just use other magic towers to keep it in check. The Lich's suggestion would definitely be a simpler and more constructive approach, but Grimoire wants to slowly destroy it from the inside personally because that would be fun. The Lich's skeletal hand shudders at the sadistic tendencies of his teacher. He tries to reason with Riley that she will be in danger too if she follows Grimoire's orders. Contrary to what the Lich expected, Riley also does not seem right in the head. She agrees with Grimoire that his method is fun and thrilling. This teacher-student duo is truly just two perverted crackheads. The Lich gives up with a sigh and leads them to the training area. It is a place he had spent a lot of time creating with Grimoire. This place was special because it could help slow down time for a person. That which would normally be considered half a year would slow down and become 2 years in this space. Even Riley could feel that the flow of magic here was different. Grimoire wished to use this to train her because even for a talent like Riley, half a year to clear a magic tower selection test was too little time. Grimoire explains that Riley has 2 exceptional abilities, namely, physical abilities gained from being a member of the Thieves Guild in the past and her superior mana affinity. Focusing solely on these 2 strengths, he thinks that learning just the Dispel spell would be the ideal path for her to follow. Dispel is a spell that disassembles the magic being cast by an opponent without needing to defend, meaning that it can make any magic heading towards its user go poof. It is counter-type magic that can help her abilities shine on the battlefield. Grimoire wants her to focus on using Dispel to prevent the opponent from casting magic, while she uses her physical abilities in a melee battle to take them down. No matter how high the opponent's magic level is, as long as they can't use magic, it would be futile for them. Grimoire tells the Lich to begin, and he starts emitting waves of magical energy. Riley is taken aback as she was not ready for this, having never learned Dispel in the past. The Lich ignores her and smiles. He believes that one can only get better at things like this quickly after they try it out themselves. Despite intending to have her learn fast, they can see no progress even after a lot of time. Grimoire is bewildered. People should normally improve when they get hit more because they would not want to get hit again. Meanwhile, Riley had been running away from the Lich's spell for an entire hour, so she had not even started making any progress. Grimoire had already started overthinking that it might be due to psychological trauma that she endured during her time at the Thieves Guild. After all, failing a mission in such a guild was not an option. If that mentality had engraved itself onto her, then she would be reluctant to reveal her weakness or show any sign of failure. This could explain why she ran away from the Lich's spells. However, Riley can feel what Grimoire is thinking and clarifies that she was just running away because she was afraid of getting hurt by the magic. Hearing that, Grimoire dismisses his previous train of thought. Riley's problem is that she does not know each detailed step for dispelling. But Grimoire replies nonchalantly that he has already told her everything she needs to know. Instead of trying to hit her with spells, the Lich forms a magic spell, but does not fire it so she can take her time to analyze it and learn how to dispel it. During a long course of 16 hours in the magical space, she understands that the key to dispelling lies in utilizing what she has learnt from pathfinding and telepathy. As Grimoire had said, she did not need to limit herself to the mediocre standards set by other magicians. She carefully figures out the magic formulas one by one, slowly and stealthily, until she finally succeeds. After all that time spent learning how to dispel a low mana sphere, she does not feel demotivated. Instead, she is optimistic that she has at least got a hang of it now. Time flies by relentlessly as she practices hard day and night under the guidance of the Lich and Grimoire. Both her melee skills and her mastery at using dispel have increased greatly. Soon September sets in as autumn arrives, the time of the year when the 5 great magic towers hold their selection exam. And right about now, Riley perfects her dispel without a single error. Her 6 months of training that felt like 2 years were finally ending. At this rate, Grimoire believes she can even handle a mid-level mage without any problem. They all thank each other for their hard work as they begin to leave the magic space. Suddenly a piece of paper flies out of the Lich's pockets and lands in Riley's hands. The paper is titled, The Ultimate Lich's World Domination Plan, Volume 12. The damned Lich had been sneaking around trying to conquer the world while Grimoire was away. He even tries to cheekily avert his eyes while being scolded by Grimoire. The skelly bastard even has the gall to pout and be stubborn that a Lich of his caliber should be allowed to have this much ambition. Grimoire recounts the previous incident regarding the Death Knight and says that the Lich should avoid getting into any more trouble for a while. The Lich tries to act cute and slyly slips away in the middle of the convo. Meanwhile, the Lich was not the only one plotting a conspiracy. Out in the northern part of the Empire, trouble stirs. A girl wearing a bright red coat and expensive jewelry is walking along a snow-covered path. She looks weak and defenseless, the perfect prey for bandits hiding in the bushes. The bandits think it will be an easy job and shoot an arrow from behind, killing her in a single shot. They greedily jog up to the girl and start looting all the expensive jewelry they can find on her body. Just when they are making merry at having secured easy money, one of them looks ahead in horror. When their boss notices and follows his vision, he is alarmed that the same woman they thought they had killed is now walking towards them from a distance, wickedly smiling from eye to eye. He looks down to realize that both the treasure and her body that they had shot have disappeared. Terror fills his heart as he realizes it is a mage. All bandits pick up their weapons, thinking that the power of numbers can save them. However, the woman laughs at their foolish attempt and sends a single magical slash towards the bandits, killing their archer instantly. The leader of the bandits is stricken with fear and paralyses at the murderous intent that the mage is giving off. She keeps killing them one after the other as she walks forward until only the leader is left. With blood-red eyes, she looks him in the eyes as she warns him of the cost of messing with a mage. 5 hours later, a group of travelers arrive at the scene in horses and carriages, among whom is an old mage with a white beard. He looks at the blood-stained snow and the brutal massacre that lay before him. He deduces that it must have been the work of a merciless mage. The non-mage travelers who are near the horses are afraid of hearing this and ask him how they should proceed. He suggests that they should ignore it and move on. It can be reported to the guards later, but there should be no problem as long as he is with them. Going back into the carriage, his attention is once again drawn to the golden-eyed hooded girl sitting across from him. It is Riley indeed. He asks her why she was visiting Wilhelm. She replies curtly that she was there to take the entrance exam for the 5 great magic towers. It feels like a suicide mission to the old man who requests her not to do so. The exams attract all sorts of mages, many of whom are lunatics who simply view the exam as a chance to murder others. He sighs as he explains that rising through the ranks at a young age was commendable, but the tower's selection exam was more than she could imagine. Riley, however, is unfazed by his words and tells him that she has already made her decision and will stand by it. The concerned old man pities her, thinking she will end up dying in the exams. Once they have arrived at Wilhelm, Riley separates from the group and heads for her destination. And of course, Grimoire is with her. Wilhelm is a city covered by snow all year round and is the heart of magical engineering. The streets are bustling with people going about their business, while some occasional explosions occur from buildings along the street where magical experiments are being conducted. Grimoire smiles as he is filled with nostalgia. It is expected that Riley might not be able to find her way since it is her first time. But the city has changed so much that even Grimoire does not recognize what way they should go to reach the selection exam administration. Using pathfinding, Riley concludes that there are 10 possible locations that might either be the administration office, academy branches, or mid-level research labs. It would not be a feasible option to try all of them to find their destination. Grimoire wonders if they should have just followed the naggy old man from the carriage. Just then, a brown-haired person wearing a fur coat calls out to Riley from behind. He says that she seems new to Wilhelm and offers to show her the way to the administration office. On seeing the distrustful look, he explains that pathfinding is useless in the city as residual magical energy from experiments interferes with it. Seeing the person's plump robe and the hazy display of magical energy around him, Grimoire easily deduces that he is a novice mage. He leaves the choice of whether to follow him or not up to Riley. Riley considers her options for a moment and decides to finally follow him. The man asks if she is there to take the selection exam and is impressed that she wants to attempt it at such a young age. Since it is her first time, he starts explaining details about Wilhelm City and how it is structured. After a while, she stops him in his tracks and asks how much longer it would take. He stammers and says that it will take around 15 more minutes for the selection exam administration. She shakes her head as she is not asking about the exam administration. She had realized that he had been trying to cast a spell on her since earlier and was boldly asking him how long it would take him to finish it. The man's expression darkens as he asks her about when exactly she noticed it. She had actually noticed it from the very beginning. Since they had met, the man had been trying to emphasize particular words in his speech. He had been using a peculiar intonation to imbue his words with magic, a technique called incantation, the very first step in casting a spell. Although she did not know what the spell was, Grimoire knew that he was trying to cast paralysis on her, a spell that immobilizes her and makes her an easier target for any kind of crime. It is a common occurrence in Wilhelm where the victims are usually young ones like Riley. The man listens to her speak and then laughs out maniacally. He asks if they followed him even after knowing that, and she agrees. The man is confused. Why would the girl follow him if she knew he was up to no good? Riley smiles and says that the reason she followed him was because even if she really fought him, he did not look like someone who could hurt her at all. The man sneers at the humiliating remark. He thinks she is presumptuous and arrogant after merely reaching the entry level of lower-ranked mages and decides to teach her a painful lesson. He says that even among the same lower ranks, the gap in skill can be as vast as the sky and the earth. Grimoire laughs out loud and says that it is indeed true, and Riley is the sky while the kidnapper is the earth. Riley asks if she is his first target for kidnapping, but the man agrees to have already kidnapped 13 or so children. He puts on a smug and proud look, saying that everyone falls for his smile and he must be really handsome. But in fact, his face looks like that of a bloated goat suffering from melanin deficiency. He further continues to blow his own trumpet by saying that he has a face that can easily make women cry. Riley sighs and says that he indeed has a face that can make women cry and they must be wailing every night. He must be an expert at making women cry with that goat-like face he has there. Impressive indeed. On realizing late that he is being mocked, he is seething with rage and curses her. Gathering mana above his palm, fires dance around him as they materialize into a spear. Grimoire remarks that the bastard might be a novice, but his control actually looks decent. Perfect for practical experience too. Letting out a war cry, he throws the spear at her, but Riley is unfazed at the fast-approaching spear. When the spear is just a few feet away, she immediately casts thought acceleration on herself. It was a magic she had learnt to use while training with the Lich. Her dynamic vision had already surpassed that of a human. Yet using thought acceleration, she could speed up her brain's processing speed to an extremely high degree. When the flaming spear is already inches away from her eyes, she uses Dispel on it, and the flame spear simply disappears as the residual flames die out, leaving nothing behind. It is as if there was never a spear there, to begin with. Seeing this happen in front of his eyes, the kidnapper cannot believe it and thinks it is some form of trickery. Riley does not care whether he understands it or not. She gathers mana on her palm and forms a small sphere with it. With a cool voice, she says that it is the difference between the sky and earth that he had mentioned earlier. Riley's ball of mana is extremely simple compared to what the kidnapper had shown them. It has no rotation, no application, and no tricks. However, it is simply unimaginably fast. It is the true form of a magic missile spell, simple yet powerful. The magic missile that Riley fires at the kidnapper completely injures him, leaving him immobilized and coughing blood. As Riley walks up to him, she gives him a small piece of advice. Being skilled in magic does not solve everything. Especially in combat, outcomes can vary greatly depending on characteristics and talent. When he does not make a sound or reply even after a while, Riley wonders if he is dead. Grimoire is stressed and asks if he really just died. He is stressed at having learnt that information and curses the kidnapper to just resurrect already. Riley had barely had her first battle to gain practical experience, and she ended up killing him. Irrespective of all that, the man did not resurrect despite his pleas. After that, they head out in search of the administration office by visiting each of the 10 locations Riley had detected with pathfinding. With no other choice, They reach their 10th building late after evening, and the last building turns out to indeed be the administration office they have been searching for. Grimoire wonders why finding it was so difficult and tries to think more about it. Strangely, no one in Wilhelm seemed to know where the administration building was. Every time they asked someone, they would be refused or scolded. There is even an obvious signboard outside the office building. Riley not detecting it with her pathfinding was simply odd. Suddenly realization hits him, and he realizes that they might have been trying to conceal the location of the office all along. He looks at the map that Riley had, and on close observation, the 10 points around the city formed an inverted pentagram, which is a magic circle. The sly bastards from the magic towers had decided to use the 10 buildings around the city to set up a concealment formation filled with illusions and barriers, spells that would confuse any who tried to find the office and make them struggle as much as possible. He feels irritated, but they both enter the building together. The first room inside the building is bright and looks purely white with a bluish tint. There is only a single table at the end, behind which is sitting a crimson-haired lady. She looks at Riley entering and turns in her chair. Smiling, she congratulates her on passing the first stage of the selection exam. The lady marks a token on the back of Riley's hand which signifies that she is a candidate for the selection exam. She explains that the token will allow her to use Wilhelm's facilities for free. Informing her that the next selection exam is in a week, she advises her to take plenty of rest. Riley wonders if they passed the first exam by chance because the exam seemed way too simple. Although it was tedious to go to all 10 buildings, it was a simple task. However, Grimoire knows that it seems simple only for Riley because she is skilled in pathfinding. None of the 10 buildings were distinctly visible on the map they had. In fact, the crimson-haired lady told them that the administration office only appears after they have found all 9 other points. It was a tedious test, but manageable nonetheless. As Riley turns to leave, the crimson-haired lady tells her to try and avoid conflict with other examinees as much as possible before the next exam. Riley is confused but agrees and leaves. Grimoire explains that there are sometimes idiots who pick fights blindly to gauge the level of other examinees before the exam. He thinks the lady warned them to be careful of such idiots. Riley says she has nothing to do with such people and does not see how that could be an issue. Suddenly, she senses a bloodthirsty aura nearby that is being directed towards her. Grimoire looks serious as he also senses the same thing. Riley recognizes it. It is the same familiar mana that she felt from the corpses they had encountered on their way to Wilhelm. The one currently emitting the killing intent would be the culprit behind the massacre they had seen. Using pathfinding, Riley tracks down the source of the killing intent to be coming from a lady wearing a red hooded cape. Before Riley can even think of what to do after having found her, a dense ball of red mana comes hurling at her. In a split second, it is before her eyes without even giving her time to react. She decides to dual cast and forms a barrier right where the sphere would land. This would allow her a moment to dodge before the barrier shatters. However, that was merely a deception to make the opponent think that it was the only thing she was putting up. Meanwhile, she also prepares a magic missile in her palm to counter immediately. However, there is a fatal flaw in her thinking. At the critical moment when she thinks she should shoot the magic missile, she finds that there are no openings in the opponent's own defense that can be utilized to make her missile land. The hostile sphere of mana shatters her barrier and goes right into her head, leaving her blood splattered across the road. However, the entire scene of the attack even happening is merely an illusion. Riley suddenly finds herself escaping a trance as she grasps for air. None of what she had seen, including her death, had been real. Her eyes dart left and right trying to figure out what just happened. She had clearly seen herself dying and was confused as to why she was still standing. More importantly, where was the enemy? Just then, the lady who had shown that bloodthirst walks up to her and clarifies that it was a battle that took place within her mind. A mental battle, as the mages used to call it, was a state of mind that the mage entered only when they were extremely concentrated. In such a mental state, the mage would detect the opponent, sense the killing intent, and think through how they would respond if a battle actually occurred. However, mental battles could feel so real that it was hard to get used to it for someone experiencing it for the first time. The hooded lady then smiles and excitedly asks if Riley just saw death. Grimoire, who had seen everything that transpired, also notices the reversed pentagram on her hand. He realizes that she is an examinee for the selection exam who did not even consider the crimson-haired lady's warning to avoid fighting. He is reminded of the scene he saw by the roadside on their way to this city, and warns Riley to be careful, because the lady in front of them really looked like a psychopath. Among all those who use magic, only an insane person would use it as a murder weapon. However, contrary to what he expected, Riley ends up accompanying the lady to a restaurant. There they start gorging on delicacies before Grimoire can even process what had happened. The lady is explaining how it is the best restaurant in Wilhelm, and how even the tower masters of the magic towers come here after the selection exam. While Riley tries to respond with a mouth shoved full of food, the lady just tells her to not worry about answering back and that she will pay for everything. Riley is a bit surprised. Seeing her confusion, the lady explains that she had been rude to Riley earlier, so she should at least treat her to this. Riley is utterly smitten by her generosity and tells Grimoire that she likes her. Grimoire is rubbing his temples, wondering how all his warnings about being careful had simply been ignored. She tells him innocently that people who treat others to good food are never bad. After the bad food at the Lich's musty cave, this tasted heavenly to her. Grimoire does not know what to make of this. He tells her that the Lich would be hurt if he heard that. He had tried his best to cook her a balanced, nutritious diet while also generously filling it with rare magical herbs from his stock. However, Riley replies that it is pointless if it does not taste good. Grimoire sighs and turns his head towards the more important matter at hand. The matter of the crazy killer having a meal with them. The killer lady introduces herself as Rebecca Duncan, but says Riley can call her Becky if she likes. As they both get up from the table, Riley thanks her for the meal. She had not found out a bit more about Becky. Rebecca Duncan, at the young age of 27, had reached the brink of the advanced level as an intermediate mage and had come to Wilhelm for the selection exam. Becky tells her that she really does not need to be grateful because all the food is free for them. After all, they had the token on the back of their hands as proof of candidature. The crimson-haired lady had told them earlier that it could be used to get most services and facilities in the city free of charge. The restaurant also happened to be one of them. Riley had just realized that she had been made a fool out of. Although she had a poker face right now, Grimoire knew that it actually meant that she was annoyed right now. On leaving the restaurant, Becky asks Riley if she has a place to stay the night. Riley reveals that she was just going to go to whichever inn was closest on the list. However, Becky is agitated on hearing the carefree decision, and says that even if they have all been inspected by the magic towers, their quality of service and facilities still differs. She takes the map and list from Riley and marks out the good places where Riley could choose to stay one by one. After a while, she had made a lot of cute caricatures on the map to help guide Riley, which actually contrasted her murderous side. After that, she says goodbye and heads out to leave, but Riley stops her asking if she was not coming together. Becky says that she was going to stay at someone's place whom she had known for a long time. Turning back, she excitedly clasps Riley's hands and asks if she wants to stay with her too, only to be met with a flat-out refusal. Based on Grimoire's experience, he knew that Becky was being sincere. Riley wonders why she is so interested in her. Grimoire says he does not know, but thinks that Becky might be curious about what kind of talent helped a novice mage pass the first stage of the selections. Riley looks at him skeptically and accuses him of speaking a bit too well for someone who just said they did not know. Grimoire acts ignorant and tries to avoid the topic by brushing it off. She continues telepathically that those of the same kind indeed recognize each other. Grimoire is annoyed and wonders if he is being called a lunatic. Breaking her telepathic conversation with the book, Becky calls out to bid goodbye. She has an extremely sweet smile, making Grimoire wonder how she could be the same maniac who unleashed killing intent at their first meet and massacred bandits like animals. He sighs as he tells Riley to talk with Becky a bit more before leaving. After all, the less information one has, the more dangerous their opponent will become. As a wise man once said, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." Riley says that she will look forward to meeting Becky. She hopes that she can fight her head-on next time without Becky casting sneaky illusion magic on her to scare her. Becky acts surprised. Riley explains that in the virtual battle fought during her first encounter with Becky, she faced death and returned to the real world. Becky had described it as a mental battle. But while it is a real concept, that was not a mental battle but an illusion magic Becky had cast on her. Becky is surprised and impressed that she has been able to figure out details that only a high-level mage could have noticed. Grimoire smiles at those words. From ancient times, there has only been one way to detect an illusion, and that is a certainty. Riley straight up declares that she is certain she could not die to an incompetent mage like Becky, and if it was a mental image, she would have won without fail. But since the impossible had happened, it must have been illusion magic. Becky clenches her fists on hearing such bold words. All mages had a strong sense of pride. None of them would be able to stay silent on being called incompetent to their face, especially when it was being said by someone of a lower rank. Becky makes the most horrifying angry expression on her face and asks her again if she would have won without fail. Riley's answer is a resolute yes. Becky is confused by this absurd situation, so much so that she forgets her anger and starts laughing out loud instead. After calming down, she tells Riley to wake up from her childish dream world. Becky is a mage who has reached the brink of an advanced level. Compared to the novice Riley, there was an immensely wide gap between them. Even Grimoire knew that the widening gap between levels cannot be easily bridged and is an established and absolute fact in the world of magic. However, Riley was someone who had fought and won against opponents much stronger than her, and multiple times at that too. She had dueled with the Lich, the Chimeras, and so much more. Riley speaks with utmost seriousness about the last person who told her about the gap in their skills. That person now lay in some unknown alley in Wilhelm with a hole in their chest. Becky laughs out loud, saying that she would have loved to attack Riley at the very moment. Although Riley tries to rile her up, Becky tells her to shut up. She would not want to be disqualified again for ignoring the administrator's warnings. Riley taunts her, saying she is just running away because she would lose. Becky pops a vein on her head out of sheer anger but holds herself back. With a deep, calm breath, she says she has met all sorts of crazy examinees before, but meeting her had been especially fun. She finally says goodbye and wishes her well until the next exam. In a wisp of pinkish mana, Becky disappears into thin air. Riley is not surprised. She had her doubts that it might have been a clone and had just confirmed it with this. It was quite an impressive cloning technique. If Riley was not as sensitive to mana, even she would not have noticed the strange but subtle fluctuations. She kind of understands at the moment why Becky was interested in her. She thinks it was merely because of curiosity. A curiosity as to what kind of reaction she would have, and when at all Riley would realize that Becky was just a clone. Whenever she was subtly hoping to be discovered, the strength of her mana flow would increase. Riley finds that fun. Grimoire, on the other hand, wonders what kind of a lunatic she is to think of such a thing as fun. Meanwhile, over at the Selection Exams Administration Office, two administrators discussed the applicants over long-distance magic communication, a method that utilized a crystal ball to transmit audio and visual information. The crimson-haired lady is the administrator on the other end of the call, while the other one is sitting behind a dimly lit desk, an auburn-haired mage with glasses. The applicants that year really do seem interesting to him. After discussing a nostalgic candidate, the lady urges him to turn to the next page, which she personally feels is the most interesting part. He turns the page and finds the application of Riley, who came from Renelmus Academy. She was a new face in the exams, and the lady mentioned that Riley had taken the selection test as soon as she arrived. The auburn-haired mage says that she seems arrogant as expected from someone from Renelmus. However, the lady smiles and asks him to guess how much time she might have taken to pass. He has a look at her application and guesses that she must have barely passed after wandering around for nearly 3 months. She shakes her head and says that this candidate had actually arrived in Wilhelm this afternoon, and it had taken her less than half a day to find the office. The fastest record was 4 hours, which belonged to Rebecca Duncan, who had to use 20 entire clones to stir up Wilhelm to achieve that time. The average time for the first test passers is usually about a week, and even Garen Theobald, the mage at the high expert level, had taken a whole day to find the management office. This meant that practically, Riley was already in the first place. The lady smiles as she says that things will be a lot more interesting to watch this year, as the auburn-haired mage agrees. Meanwhile, Riley, who had been told to take an entire week's rest until the next combat test, was living the most leisurely lifestyle she could have ever imagined. She would wake up when the sun was high and have breakfast, then another nap followed by lunch, then dinner again before going to sleep. Following such a schedule, it did not even take 3 days before she was already bored and wanted to do something other than rest. She dresses up in better clothes that she had purchased recently and comes out. Following Grimoire's suggestion, they both go for a walk and happen to walk by the Arcadia Central Library. Riley asks if Grimoire has heard of it. He tells her that it was probably the second largest library after Ludimus, having been around for hundreds of years. It is also the place with the most number of magical books stored. He is annoyed at having to enter a library again, but Riley reasons that she has nothing better to do, and she will not even have to follow any special procedures due to her merit as a candidate. Grimoire knew it would be a beneficial experience for her, but still debates it himself due to his trauma of having been stuck in a library for 300 years before this. Riley reasons that he would have to enter a library someday or the other anyway. Grimoire decides to face his trauma and agrees to go in. He closes his eyes and heads in. After all, if it does not work out for him inside, he can always come back out. The insides of the library are extremely beautiful, and Riley is fascinated by its splendor. Meanwhile, Grimoire comments lazily that it does not have the overwhelming aura of crammed books like in Renelmus, so it still feels fine. After she shows her identity token at the counter, she receives a platinum card that can be used to access any part of the library she wants. Both teacher and disciple have the same lunatic thought process, and with goofy smiles on their faces, head straight for the restricted area with forbidden books. Riley feels excited at having entered the restricted section of such a library so easily. The room is dark, and Grimoire looks around for a lamp to pick up. Riley points in a direction which seems to be better lighted than the rest. Walking over, she finds that it is a reading area within the restricted room, which is well lit. And sitting behind one of the tables reading a book is an old man. When he turns around to sense her presence, Riley realizes it is the same old man she had met in the carriage earlier. The old man is surprised to see her and questions why she was there. She simply shows him the token on the back of her hand. Seeing it, the old man is impressed that she managed to pass despite the annoying spell. Riley had hoped that seeing the token, his impression of her would improve. However, the old man still repeats his old advice and tells her to just give up. He says that the exam will be far more brutal moving forward, and mages with little experience like her would face too much danger, despite having immense talent. Thus, he advises her to give up and wait for the next opportunity instead. She thanks him for his genuine concern, but says that she has already made her decision. Nothing can shake her resolute will. The old man frowns and calls her foolish, brimming with reckless enthusiasm typical of youth her age. They have a throw of words and retorts when finally the old man is tired. He says that if she is really that confident, then he will show her what he means himself and requests a duel.